Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. So my first question for you is, what does the average week in the life look like for you?
Oh my. Well, I can tell you that this year it's been very different to any average week that I've had so far leading up to it. At the beginning of the year, I made the decision to start a season of racing gravel, and therefore this year has kind of felt like a bit of a whirlwind. Every week's been quite different because I joined a gravel team and we've been traveling quite a lot to races. So I almost can't give you an answer for an average week, but yeah, it always involves a lot of riding bikes and as much sleeping as I possibly can to recover from that. And it will take an exciting week. It will have a race on the weekend.
And why did you choose gravel racing? Because it's quite a new thing. Everyone's loving like the alternative calendar. What made you think this is for me?
Yeah, well, I started riding road bikes a couple years ago and I really just enjoyed the adventure side of it. I think like my most favorite part about riding bikes was being able to go out and explore and having that like little adventure every single day. And eventually you live in the same place for long enough, you kind of get to know the paved roads in and out. You know them like the back of your hand. And that made me kind of decide, hey, I could try gravel, and that would sort of expand my road and trail network by so much. And so I ended up getting my gravel bike and I just immediately fell in love with it. It was so much fun. It was different than road biking because it had that, okay, I can go explore this place and I'm not restricted to the road part. So I really enjoyed riding my gravel. And then I was a Panama ambassador, and Panama had sent us down to Italy for the gravel team enough for their kind of autumn camp, let's put it this way, camp or festival called Memory Bike Festival. And that was my first time going down there, meeting all of these gravel people. I met the team. We got along really well. And fast forward, eventually they ended up asking me if I were interested in joining them for a season of racing. And I was like, yes. I mean, I'd kind of been flirting with the idea of doing some sort of racing in the future. And they came and asked the question, right time, right place, I guess. And it all happened very quickly, but that's how I ended up racing my gravel bike.
Incredible. And would you have said that you were quite a serious cyclist beforehand, or was it quite a big jump up to suddenly having to train for, like, what length are the gravel races that you're doing? Like, I don't think there's ever such a thing as a short gravel race.
No, you're right. They're quite lengthy. Yeah, the shorter ones being the UCI races, which are around 120 to 130 kilometers. And then the longer adventure races are usually like a day long, like around 300 kilometers plus, give or take. So yeah, long rides. I would not consider myself serious, and I still don't consider myself a serious cyclist. But what I can say is that before I really just rode very intuitively and however I felt like on the day. And it was a lot of social riding, a lot of riding with my friends mostly. And what's changed this year for sure is that I've kind of introduced a structure with the help of a coach. And I've therefore been also doing a lot more solo riding because I've had some specific sessions that I've been doing and that are, of course, they're very tailored to you. And therefore it's hard to put that into a social group ride setting. So it's, the riding part has started to feel more serious this year. Yeah.
And what sort of training are you doing? Like, what volume is it? How did you adjust to that? Just deciding, okay, I'm going to suddenly get a coach, because I guess when you're social riding, maybe you're doing like 8 hours a week, 10 hours a week. Suddenly it's like a big jump up to, I've got to get round a 300k race on gravel.
Yeah, that's actually the funny thing this year. It's volume wise. I think also in effort wise, to be entirely honest, I was doing more before I ended up getting a coach. I actually spent a lot of time on my bike and kind of left to my own devices. That's what I would do. And I would find it very hard to introduce rest days. I wouldn't do them on my own, really. So it's been an adjustment in the sense that I haven't, it's not like, oh, I feel good today, so I'm going to go hard. Or I feel really tired today, so therefore I'd go easy. And then but your schedule, for example, has intervals, and then you do those instead, even though you might feel a little tired. So that's what's changed, is that it's not as intuitive, or it wasn't as intuitive. To be honest, I actually decreased my volume this year when I was working with a coach, because I had come off of the previous year with quite a big fatigue debt that I hadn't really paid. I had definitely dipped into overtraining unintentionally, and I had definitely overcooked it, and my body was very tired, and there were some very clear symptoms, which I had just chosen to ignore for too long. So I had come kind of on the back foot into the season with a very wobbly foundation, I'm going to put it. And so together with my coach, we decided to kind of prioritize rest and kind of playing the long game here. So it was clear that this season was not going to be a peak season, which worked out anyways, because I was learning the ins and outs of racing anyways. But so it's been a lower volume year than I personally ideally would have liked to do, but looking back on it, it made sense to kind of give my body time to adjust to the travel schedule, the race schedule, and just introducing structure. I mean, that's new and has a sort of stress all in and of itself, just because it's something new. It takes time to adjust to.
And how did you deal with that mentally, of you're used to riding a lot of hours, high intensity, then suddenly you've decided to take it seriously, you're taking a step up, you're going to do some races, you have a coach, and yet you're doing less riding. Did that stress you out? How did you deal with that, trusting the process and almost being less intuitive?
It was difficult. I'm not, I won't sugarcoat it. I had a tough year with that. And of course, there was that constant battle of, okay, trust the process. But this feels so wrong to me right now, because I had been doing a specific type of riding and very much kind of using riding also as a way to kind of de-stress. And from my day-to-day, it had been like that mechanism that had been in place for a few years already. And so I was so used to just riding at one specific pace, which just happened to be as hard as I could go on that day in that moment. And that's the only way I rode. And then adjusting to, really slowing down and learning about your zones and sticking to your zones and staying honest with yourself during your training session. That was, it was very difficult. It stressed me out, and I definitely questioned it a lot. Yeah, you definitely have to really trust the process and understand that there are no short-term gains. Everything you do in this case should make sense for the long term, and this, like, the whole sustainability of it is very important. And I'm a very impatient person. I had a hard time not being able to do what I wanted when I wanted.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's the reason you get a coach, to have that outside accountability for, in your case, to make sure you're not overtraining rather than undertraining, because often it's one way or the other, isn't it? Rarely people are like bang on the money, which is why there's a whole coaching industry, I guess.
Exactly.
So can you talk me through your first race? What was it? Where was it? Length? Good, bad?
Yeah. Bit of a difficult one, because we sort of had our season debut at the Gran Fondo Strade Bianche, which officially on paper is not a race. It's a Gran Fondo, but it is the most competitive Gran Fondo, I think, that there is. And it's along the Strade Bianche route in Siena, Italy. And this was, I think, beginning of March. Oh God, I can't remember the exact date. But anyways, it was the first time that the whole team was together participating in an event. And it was the first ever competitive cycling event that I had been a part of. I remember the morning of, I was just a massive bundle of nerves, actually night before as well, because there were 6,000 people starting on this 130 kilometer route with, I think, 3,000 meters of climbing, something like that. It was very hilly. And it was mostly road, which is funny because the rest of the season was gravel, but it was mostly a road event. And it was a mass start. It was hectic. It was crazy. On the start line, I was terrified, but I had a great group of girls around me, and we kind of distracted each other. But once we crossed the start line, immediately there was this kind of feeling of a hyper focus. It's like, okay, we're in this now, we're doing this now. And then it's just about focusing on navigating through this big bunch of people down winding Italian roads. I was just like running on adrenaline in that moment. And then during the race, that fear all just sort of melted away. And I was having so much fun out there. At the beginning, sort of being cautious and making sure I was not overlapping wheels or not getting in anyone's way. And then as the race progressed, I sort of eased into it and had the most fun like drafting people and then trying to overtake. And then it kind of felt like a video game eventually. And so I crossed the finish line. I don't know how long behind my teammates, but crossing that finish line, like it almost felt like a personal win just because I was like, first race completed, didn't crash, made it through, had fun, and then got to the finish line. The whole team was there. They let me know I made top 10, which I was absolutely ecstatic about. And it was just overall a super fun experience. And I was just immediately hooked after that. And then, yeah, it was straight into a full season of travel.
And how many race days have you done this year then?
So I've done 9 total races this year, but a lot of them being quite long events, which require a decent amount of recovery after. So it's been 9 races in, actually I didn't count, but quite a number of countries, including a trip overseas to America, which was great. Yeah, and a complete mixed bag of races. So short UCIs to one long multi-day ultra event.
And you live in Vienna. What's the cycling community like there?
Vienna is a fantastic place to ride your bike. We kind of have everything from flat to hills. The mountains are close-ish by. It's not mountainous like a lot of people think, but we do have some great rolling hills close by. From a landscape point of view, Vienna's honestly ideal. I love it. And then from a community, it's really been growing. It has taken off the last couple of years, which is so great to see. We now have a couple of group rides that start in the mornings. We have a girls group ride. So it's really starting to come together. But up until now, it's kind of been just small groups of friends that will go out and ride together. And then it will snowball from there and slowly become a bigger thing. So it's growing and it's an exciting place to be right now in that respect.
Amazing. So if you're going to Vienna, make sure to have a bike handy so you can join some group rides. That's a good tip.
Definitely. Definitely.
Amazing. What surprised you since entering the racing world?
Oh God. I mean, I could probably talk about this one forever because this whole year has just been such a huge learning experience and was full of so many surprises. I think the biggest one was just to see how small, honestly, the cycling community is. Or I mean, small and kind of vast at the same time, but you're always running into the same people at the same events, and it always feels like a traveling circus at times. Each race, you kind of see your people again, and it's great. It's been nice to see how close knit this community is, and that's been really cool because I thought that this was this big world that from the outside just looked quite professional, and then when you're in it and you're at these races and you realize everyone is super lovely and you become friends really quick with people, which is super fun, and that's the part I really loved. And I think it's also surprised me how much a season of racing and traveling and being part of the community does require of you. I sort of went into this season thinking like, yes, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And then once we were well into the season, or I started noticing it was taking a toll on me. It was a lot. It was a lot of impressions. It was a lot of kind of being switched on all the time. And I think I didn't expect it to be that full on for as long as it was, which was amazing. But I think I also learned the importance of like knowing when to set yourself some boundaries and take a step back and let yourself breathe for a second, because it is intense and it's fun and you can get carried away with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the toll that it will take out in you, if people are listening and they think, oh, 9 race days, that's fine. But like, you also have a travel day either side. Plus you'll be packing the day before your travel day, then unpacking, and then you'll be training, you'll be tapering, you'll be planning. There's a huge amount of prep that goes into this. Because it doesn't just happen. You don't just rock up and someone gives you a bike in your skin suit and away you go. You do need to be prepared for that. How did you deal with that, the toll that it was taking on you, coming into the season quite fatigued? Did you have a break like halfway through, or did you keep your momentum going from March until the end of the season?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Is I think you see the racing from the outside, but you underestimate what goes on behind all of that. Yeah, the travel, the training, and making everything work somehow. Yeah, it was a trial and error season, definitely. I tried my best to stay consistent with training and efforts. I did end up taking a break quite early on in the season. Right after Strade Bianche, actually, up until that point, I had been training nonstop. I hadn't taken a break in the winter, which was an error. But I had listened to a professional who had told me, "You're not a professional racer. If you don't feel like you need a break, you don't need to take one." And so I was like, okay, well, then I won't take a break. I'll keep going. So I kept going through the winter, and that's then around March, right after Strade Bianche, I noticed, oh, this is not good. This is not going in a good direction. So I took a step back in March already, and then just focused on, hey, build up slowly and take in the race season, how it comes at you, but don't expect the performance of a lifetime. And I think that was a very important kind of little reset that I had to do for myself. I came in with some lofty expectations, and then just that reset that I did, where it's like, you're here to learn, take your time, you can focus in the years to come on results, but for now, just one day at a time. And that really helped. So from March on, I really tried to focus on that. Yeah, I mean, it was still quite a lot. And I'm in no means trying to, or I'm not feeling sorry for myself for complaining, because this year has been absolutely incredible. But I did want to highlight that it did make me feel very tired. And in the moments, I think, when I was at home in Vienna, briefly, I would really just sleep for those few days. I would come home, I would unpack, I would sleep, I would repair the bike, I would repack, and then go again. Yeah.
And what about the fueling aspect and nutritional side of, I guess, ultra gravel events?
Yeah, so this is a big topic for me. I think this year I learned the importance of fueling, because working with coaches, working with people who have been doing it for a long time, it's, if you're not fueling your body for what it's doing, for what you're asking it to do, you are digging yourself a hole for a long time. And I was not aware of that for quite a few years leading up to that. And I think cycling is definitely a bit of a funny sport, because the fueling part is such a important aspect, because we are doing such long hours on the bike. To remain on top of that while you're riding, before, after, knowing when to fuel what and when you're eating for recovery. That I've learned this year, just to remain consistent with that and stay on top of it, and really, be honest with myself of, are you really doing the best for your body right now? Yeah, that's been a big part of the learning curve this year, and I think an important one for a lot more of us to realize, because when I had started the sport, I didn't know that you had to fuel. I didn't know that I was burning this much, and I had to compensate for what I was doing.
What practical changes have you made having realized this?
So I've started really making sure that I am fueling on my rides. I never leave the house without snacks anymore. So for the easier rides, I make sure to have something every 45 minutes. And on the harder rides, then I really make sure to up my fueling to almost to what I would want during a race. Just to get my body prepared for that, and also just to make sure that I'm on top of my recovery as well. So fueling on rides has become so important and has also had the positive effect that if my ride is properly fueled, then I don't get extreme hunger after my rides, which is what I used to deal with. And I used to think it was a willpower thing that I couldn't get on top of when I would get extremely hungry after doing big rides. And now I realize it's just because I hadn't adequately helped my body do what I'm asking it to do. So yeah, fueling during rides and also making sure I'm never doing a fasted ride. I always make sure to have something beforehand because as women, it's been proven that fasted riding is not exactly helpful for keeping your hormones in balance, which can have a domino effect of a bunch of unpleasant things if you're not paying attention to that.
Exactly. I think understanding nutrition, unless you're really interested in like the science behind it, is something that it's quite hard to kind of dig into. Like, okay, so I need this many grams of this and then this many grams of that, and then I need this then and then this after exercise and this during, and it's quite complicated. But basically you do need to understand it to be able to optimize your performance, because you'll spend the time planning your training or outsourcing, paying a coach to plan your training. But if you're not refueling yourselves, as women, if we're not having enough protein, like I've talked about this on the podcast before, it's so important. I don't know if you've heard of Stacey Sims, Dr. Stacey Sims. She wrote a book called Roar.
She's great.
Yeah, that was such a game changer. Like, she talked about the importance of hydration, which, having grown up in Britain, it's not something I really considered, because you don't really dehydrate hugely because it's not very hot. But you need to actually have sodium, salt in your water to be able to absorb it. Otherwise, it just passes through your system and you think you're super hydrated because you're going to pee a lot, to put it nicely. That book was such a game changer for me. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I have yet to read the full book, but I have heard, I'm sure you heard Magali Rochette's podcast, Fever Talk, and she's had Dr. Stacey Sims on as well. And I really enjoyed listening to that podcast and learning about it, and that definitely helped a lot. But just circling back to what you said at the beginning there I remember feeling so frustrated when I realized, oh, I actually have to think about nutrition and I have to plan this. I remember thinking like, oh, why can't it just be easy and I don't have to think about it and do it? But I learned it's really worth it, and you do get into the swing of things eventually. It does happen, and then it becomes second nature. But it seems like this big confusing mess that you have to deal with, but eventually it does get easier to deal with. But no, I think especially as women, making sure that we're eating well or enough is critical. To hear that we're learning this.
I know, right? You learn it kind of gradually, like even after you've been active for however many years, then you kind of almost accidentally fall upon this big fact that you're not optimizing your performance because you're not actually fueling yourself or hydrating yourself properly. And it's like, oh, okay, wait. And this could be like not even just like 1% or 2%. It could be like 10% of your performance and your recovery.
Huge. It's that light bulb moment where you're like, oh, that's why. That makes so much sense now. Yes.
Exactly. And it's not just for people who are embarking on a 300-kilometer gravel race. It's for people who are going to the office after their gym session, having not eaten anything that day or not having had protein in the morning, and then wondering why they crash in their concentration or their attention span just goes. It's because you're not fueling yourself. You're living off caffeine and sugar, if anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're not actually having things that are going to build you up.
I wish I would have understood this when I had first started cycling, but
I know,
hindsight is 2020, isn't it?
And if someone is thinking, how do I actually learn more about nutrition? Where do I go? Firstly, I would say Stacey Sims is a great place to start, but where would you direct them to?
Oh, like you said, Stacey Sims is fantastic. And then I'm I'm not sure if you've heard of Renee McGregor. She's also done some fantastic talks and work on fueling for women. I currently don't have a cycling coach because I'm just trying to get back to my baseline now in this off season. But I have started working with a trainer who is also assisting with my nutrition, and it's been really helpful to have some feedback from the outside, and also just having someone to hold you accountable, and who is able to tell you, like, yep, okay, you're missing maybe this amount of protein or these amount of carbs. That's been really helpful for me, just to kind of figure out, okay, where is my medium. So I think in this off season, having someone to help with diet has been almost more important for me than with the cycling training aspect, because without that, your training isn't going to be great either, or not as great as it could be.
Yeah, isn't it? Because you wouldn't necessarily think, I'm going to hire a nutritionalist when you're not a full-time professional athlete. But it's just as important as a coach, because you're not going to be able to perform at all if you're not getting the best out of it and having that understanding, which is actually, it's very difficult to get the full understanding of nutrition unless you properly delve into it. And I know that I do not have a huge understanding of it, and there's definitely more that I need to research into it. It's just something that I don't really want to do because I'm not a hugely science person. So I totally get when you say, like, oh, really, I've got to do that now? I think a lot of people will relate to that.
Yeah. It doesn't seem the first thing you think of when you think of, hey, let's go racing, is to like break it down to the absolute basics of, okay, how are you eating? But yeah, like I said, for me, I think right now it's more important that I make sure that there's consistency there and a structure there that I can then carry on into the season. And that's something that I then don't have to think about come the more intense training days and race days and travel days. So I'm curious to see how this approach works for next year, but it's definitely feeling good, and I overall feel better than I did before. And it's going to be a long road, but feeling better.
I guess for the cycling industry and for bike racing generally, people start quite young. You can be like, I don't know, 10, starting your first bike race, 15. So how did you feel starting your first race this year, probably among people who've been racing their entire life?
Yeah, well, I'm so jealous of the people who have been doing this for so long, mostly though for their bike handling skills, because I feel like when you start later, it doesn't come to you naturally. It's something that you very actively have to work on, especially in gravel where, things get a little more technical. So I feel like that's a big part that I want to work on, and which is why this year was also great, so I could focus on my descending skills and just my technical bike handling all around. I think that's where I noticed the biggest difference. I'm definitely on the older side to start racing, but I also think it's cool to see that there are women who are my age and maybe even a bit older who are doing incredible things. And that I think is insanely inspiring. And knowing, hey, yes, I may be 28 now, but if I stay consistent, like there's still the possibility of me, like I can still get to my best. And so I think it's been a nice way of thinking it, of not like, I'm too old to start racing. I'm like, this is something that I want to do that brings me an immense sense of gratification. So why not?
Exactly. Why not? I guess people who want to follow their dreams and try something new, and perhaps it goes against the norm, so to speak, of whatever that they want to do. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You're saying that you started racing this year and you're like, it was the best. I utterly loved it. So imagine if you hadn't given it that chance because you were like, nah, maybe I won't bother, or maybe I've missed the boat, or whatever.
Exactly.
Like, you could have missed out on this whole new life and this whole new community and these experiences if you'd listened to that inner voice.
Absolutely. And I think it would be such a shame, because even if I'm racing and I know in certain races there's no way that I will ever win this race. However, doing it, being out there, doing the whole experience, pushing your, I don't know, if you've done a race once, then for me especially, like I want to go do that race again and see if I can improve on it. I think that is just as motivating, and for me that's the exciting part, is like making it this challenge that you're doing with other people as well. So I think that also is maybe a nice point of gravel, is that it's more than just the results at the end of the day, which is quite fun.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do when you're not riding a bike? How do you spend your time working, living?
Yeah, so I am actually a landscape architect. And so up until this year, I've been working full time in my office job. And so riding was very much pushed to mornings and evenings and weekends. This year, I have had a wonderful opportunity to pursue an online master's. And I've been able to take a break from my office job for this year. So I've been attending some online classes and have been able to mostly freely ride my bike when and wherever, which has been great, which will not be the case next year again. Next year I will have to go back to work again. Yeah, so I spend my time working, and other than that, like I think I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, sleeping. That is important.
The reality of an athlete. I'm either on the bike working or sleeping, literally.
Bike, work, sleep, maybe cook your dinners, and maybe wash a little laundry every now and again. I think that the sad part of it is that I've been seeing my friends a whole lot less than I used to or would ideally like, but that's why off season is so important. Reconnect.
There's only so many hours in the day, and only so many ways you can split the pie, which unfortunately is just one of those facts of life, isn't it?
So enjoy it. Yeah, I enjoy the fact that I'm able to, or I like having a structured day. That's, I think, one thing I noticed this year is I almost missed my job because it just gave my day that very clear structure. And then I was much better about really planning, like, okay, I'm going to go for a ride in the morning and then I do it, versus when you have all day, more or less, then you'll be like, okay, I can go later. Oh, I'll go later. And then I almost found I ended up doing less this year than I did when everything was when everything had its time. So I'm excited to go back to a routine. I think maybe that's one of the big takeaways this year, is that I very much enjoyed having a routine.
There is something to be said about that, isn't it? Because there's always a line when the motivation kind of runs out and the discipline kicks in. And if you are working 9 to 5 or 11 till 6 or whatever your hours may be, you need to get back by a certain time because you need to get through the shower, get into some respectable clothing that's not lycra, and get to a desk or get out and meet clients or whatever your job may be. And if you don't have that structure, then you might wake up at 8 instead of 7 and have a breakfast and maybe a little scroll on Instagram, have a coffee or two. Oh, I think it might rain. Maybe I'll just wait out. And suddenly it's midday. So it's really interesting that you would say that's something you miss.
Yeah, I think so. Looking forward to having that kind of one really consistent thing that I can rely on throughout the year, regardless of what happens in my racing calendar, is the job remains consistent. And I think mentally that will be very, very good to have.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess financially as well, cycling generally is not something that has a lot of funding behind it compared to other sports. Gravel racing being a smaller segment of the biking calendar will have even less funding. So I imagine that it's very difficult to make money out of it. And if you're taking a cut in your hours, it's a sacrifice a lot of people end up having to make if they want to pursue competitive racing. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. I think this is an area that was also not really talked about much yet. Is it's very hard to make to become a gravel pro, especially in Europe. I think it's a little bit different in America, but in Europe, it's extremely hard to become a full-time gravel pro that you can live off of and pay your rent. Yeah, it's definitely, you have to make some sacrifices if you want to pursue a full season of racing. At the end of the day, you are not going to be rich off of this, but
exactly. But you get to ride your bike a lot, so it's all.
But you get to ride your bike, so you need to figure out that balance. Is like, how do I make enough to get by, but also enjoy riding my bike? But yeah, it's been an interesting year in those regards, and it'll be nice to have the financial stability of a job next year again.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you were an ambassador for Panamal, which is a cycling clothing company. If anyone's not familiar with it, do you work with other brands? Is that something that's still ongoing, that perhaps that could be an avenue, you having a social media platform that you can make money out of, that you can supplement it, that you can grow it? Like, what's your aim or vision for that area in your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're correct. I was an ambassador up until last year with Panamal. They kind of, I would say, are almost at fault for this whole bike part of my life now.
Yeah.
They definitely helped. They helped accelerate it. No, I've been working with Panamal for 3 years now, 3.5, 4 years. So it's been a very nice, close relationship. And I'm not officially an ambassador anymore because I'm part of the team. And our team is also sponsored by Panamal. So I haven't quite left the Panamal crew yet, nor will I. Yeah, so that definitely has been extremely helpful because they do supply me with what I need to wear to ride. And that is also quite, and it can be an expensive part of cycling. It's just making sure you have all the gear that you're going to need. Also, especially in the winter when you start having to put on a million layers. Yeah, that's where the social media side of things has been. It has been super helpful, is to kind of give myself or it's been helpful because it's given me a platform to kind of share what I'm doing, share the things that I feel like taking photos and videos of. And that has been great. And it has also allowed or given me the opportunity to work with other brands, which this year have been through the team. We've had our sponsors from wheels to bike to everything, and we're all sort of helping promote these brands, I guess, through our social media accounts, and they've in turn supported us with all of the gear we need for a race season, which has been great. As far as what I plan for this, I think I don't, to be entirely honest, I don't really have a plan for my social media. It's kind of very, very intuitive. I post what I want to post when I want to post it. And I kind of just feel like sharing what I think is pretty or interesting, or sometimes when I have a thought, I feel like putting that out there. And I hope that people enjoy looking at it or reading it. So there's no concrete plan. The only thing that I do want to do this year is kind of to share more my personal experience of a racing season. Having done it all this year or coming year, I would like to kind of highlight more the ups and downs of racing, and hopefully make it a little bit more tangible if anyone cares to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the insights that you're giving, it's relatable as well, because you're talking about the difficulties of it, of being new to it, of what you've learned, of the things that, yeah, you only learn by doing it. Being able to share that with your followers is something that is really special, I guess, as well, for you to reflect on it, but also say, like, guys, you can do this if you want to do it. The only thing stopping you is the thoughts in your head. Like, go and try it. And if you don't like it, then that's fine, because you've done it.
Oh my God. Yeah. If I could have one thing, if anyone out there sees what I'm doing and realizes like, hey, okay, she's doing it, I can do that. I mean, that's great. That's hopefully what all of this social media thing is for, is that it's hopefully doing some good. Yeah, that would be the dream.
And if someone wants to follow you online and keep up to date with your racing, your training, and of course, getting to know you a bit more and your experiences through this year and on to next year, where should they go?
I post the most on Instagram. So my page there, it's just my name. And
I'll link it
then,
below as well.
oh, thank you. And then as far as training, I'm not sure if I'm the best to give training advice or if it's definitely not a one size fits all, but I do upload to Strava if anyone wants to follow adventures there, or at the least, if you ever come visit Vienna, to steal some really nice routes. Strava is also a regular social media platform for me.
Amazing. Yeah, always good to have some good followers in Strava. And I imagine you put a lot of nice photos up as well, which is always good.
I try to.
Well, I'll put those links in the description so you can check those out. And thank you so much for joining, Anna, and talking about your experience racing. And I wish you all the best for next year and beyond, and enjoy the off season while it continues.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to following along your podcast journey here.